You're listening to the voices behind Women's Cricket Chat. That's Hannah, Georgie, Cassie, Mahika and Alex. Coming up on today's podcast, we've got former England spinner and double World Cup winner Holly Colvin. And we talked to Holly about all things cricket, in particular being the youngest cricketer, male or female, to make their debut for England, as well as taking a step back from playing cricket and going into a more administrative role and talking all things Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, so Holly, obviously we got in touch with you because we are at Women's Cricket Chat and we're all about the women's game, celebrating the superstars behind it, in front of it, involved in it in every kind of way. And you seem to have your fingers in many pies around the women's cricket game. Not saying that you bowl pies, because we're not having any of that, but you've been there, you've done that, you've got the t-shirt, the headset, the microphone and everything to go with it. So obviously we were like, we've got to talk to this girl. So yeah, to start us off, we can talk about like how your cricket journey started, like your internationals. You made your debut just casually, the youngest English player ever, men's or women's. What was it like when you were first drafted in for that debut game?
Yeah, quite surreal is probably the first point. I think it was obviously a very different era of women's cricket back then. I mean, my home ground and home county is Sussex, and the 2005 Ashes Test match was being played at Hove. I was drafted in to basically netball at the team the few days before and the training leading up to the test match itself. And they have had legendary, Shelley Nitschke in their team, so they wanted a left-arm spinner, so off I popped. And I just remember getting home one evening or being home, and my mum passing me the phone with a very confused look on her face and said, "Oh, Richard Bates wants to speak to you," who was the head coach at the time. And I was like, "Oh, okay, nice." And he was like, "Oh, are you free for the next 4 days?" And I was like, "Yep, it's school holidays, not really doing anything. Sure, I'm available." Like, "Oh, we'd like you to play." And I was like, "Sorry," like thinking, run the drinks, be helpful in the background. They're like, "No, we want you to play in the test match." And I was like, right, sure, no problem. And obviously had to get all my parents' permission, had to get over there and everything else. And then, got drafted into this test match for 4 days. I knew a couple of the girls in the team vaguely, because I'd only made, I think, my county debut for the senior team the year before when I was 14. And I was bowling. What was more funny, I think, was I was bowling to the likes of like Belinda Clark, Lisa Kiteley, Catherine Fitzpatrick, Julia Price, who I actually know quite well now. And I genuinely had no idea who they were. And I think that's quite a testament of how times have changed, where I was bowling to arguably some of the greatest players the women's game's ever seen, and I didn't even really know who they were, which actually worked to my advantage because I was just kind of bowling and I didn't really realize who it was and kind of the occasion of it all. So the actual test match is a bit of a blur, but I still claim that I got Julia Price out first ball, which is she still holds against me now, so which is great. But it was good fun and a bit of a whirlwind and a bit of a pleasant surprise.
And obviously you made your debut in that 2005 Ashes Test and you almost took a hat trick. You got the likes of Kate Blackwell and Julia Price out, and then you almost got Julie Hayes out. What was it like being so young, making your debut for England in any format, and then to potentially take a hat trick as well on debut?
I think the first time I kind of realised it was a big occasion was like on day 2, when I think it made national newspapers, and there were a few press like about, and I was like, I'd never really received that sort of attention before. And again, it was kind of like I was almost the best version of myself because I had no fear at that age. I had really nothing to lose. Everyone else had less, more to lose, I guess, for getting out to a schoolgirl. And I just remember Catherine Fitzpatrick, Fitzy, being quite terrifying at the top of her mark because she would bound in off a very long run and bowl the ball pretty fast. But I was used to playing a lot of boys cricket as well. Back then I was playing for my school boys team, and I think it was a great occasion. But it's good.
And obviously at the time, it was your school holidays. Most people are getting up to God only knows what in their school holidays. You're obviously looking ahead to your GCSEs, which which went quite well, just casually with just a couple A stars in there, a couple more A stars, just a few. What was it like trying to balance international Ashes cricket with school, with social life, with looking to the future, planning for, A levels, AS levels, and university and beyond?
I think, well, firstly, I was a geek at school, and it was a good job that I played a lot of sport because, I was, I guess, knew a lot more people in different friendship groups playing a lot of sport. I'm actually probably more disorganized now than I was very regimentally organized when I was a kid. And I would always make sure that I kind of scheduled time for anything as much as I could. And for me, I kind of got this, not satisfaction is the wrong word, but I knew if I scheduled time for everything, I could only do as much as I could in the time that I had, and I couldn't do any better. And so I would make sure there was time for revision, time for training, all the rest of it. And I think I kind of managed my time that way. But for me, cricket kind of came about by accident. I'd never planned to be an international cricketer. I'd never even dreamed of being a professional cricketer. That's another conversation. And so schoolwork always came first, really. So, for example, when I did my A levels, I actually, when it was the January modules in, I think it was 2008, I flew out late to Australia because I was doing my January exams, and then I missed the tour of New Zealand to go back to school. And the same with my final year at university, I missed a tour to complete my finals. So there were a lot of girls in the team that deferred or did their uni degree over 5 years and kind of did it more part-time. Whereas for me, I was like, no, I'm going to get my uni degree, do it in 3 years, and then cricket will continue after that. Because for me, kind of your education at the time was for my career, whereas cricket was just something I happened to be good at.
And you mentioned there that cricket perhaps wasn't the ideal route for you to go down. So what were you hoping would be your career choice instead? Because after all, you did study at Durham, you did do natural sciences. So what was sort of the thinking behind that?
Well, growing up, I did watch a lot of crime dramas and thought that my calling was to be a forensic scientist and catch bad people. Then as my science education at school and degree level, I realized how much I hated labs. And I was like, no, that's not for me. At one point, I wanted to be a medic and help people. I'm fascinated about the human body, how that all works, but realized that, again, was pretty time consuming and a very long education and probably wasn't compatible. So I kind of just did something education wise that I enjoyed and was interested in, and thought I'll figure the rest out from there, and didn't really have a plan. The one thing I would say, and actually it's quite a nice story, I reached out to her not so long ago, but the Professional Cricket Association back then, they still do now, have personal development managers. And we had Kate Green at Sussex when I was in the academy there, and we ran a community project, and she just took it to the group. There was me and Sarah Taylor and the rest of them lads, and said, right, you've got the opportunity to do whatever you want to reach out to the community. And we decided to run a fundraising cricket match to raise money for charity and also engage in the club. And kind of that got me into wanting to be in events, which sounds ridiculous now. But yeah, that was kind of me at 16, 17. And I genuinely messaged her when I got the job with the Commonwealth Games and said, it seems like a long time ago that when I was 17, I wanted to do something in cricket events. And now I am running the first ever women's cricket competition in the Birmingham 22 Commonwealth Games. Is quite cool. So yeah, I guess events and cricket eventually came to fruition.
And it sort of seems like everything sort of all went in a big mixing pot at the beginning, and it's really come out in the right direction for you. We'll come back to the Commonwealth Games in a bit, because that is obviously absolutely massive. But you say at the time, you were doing stuff looking at the PCA and things like that, and they obviously help support cricketers, with their development, with their balancing of their time and things like that. Do you think that's changed for women in the game since you started out?
Yeah, I think the landscape and the professionalism of women's cricket has changed tremendously, which means kind of the level of servicing and support required by the PCA has also changed and adapted accordingly. I think back in my day, which is always something that people say, isn't it? I literally 6 months before the first ever professional contracts came about, I decided to take time out. And so the era I was playing in, it was pretty much fully amateur. You got some expenses and some funding support, but it wasn't enough to sustain you. You needed something else. You needed a part-time, full-time, whatever job it was. And so when you transitioned out of cricket, most women that were playing at the time would transition back into the job they were already doing part-time, but turning it into a full-time job, or kind of molding themselves into an actual career that they've got kind of part-time experience in. Whereas now it's because it's full-time professional at the international level and now filtering down into domestic cricket. It's a very different transition for people who have just really focused on their cricket careers and may not necessarily have as much experience in other areas of sport, of business, of kind of working life.
And you mentioned that you took some time out. So it was back in, was it 2014, you took a sabbatical and you went over to Africa to help out with AIDS awareness. How did you use cricket over there to try and boost that? And was that something that sort of really stuck in your mind and now has led to all your work with Cricket Without Boundaries these days?
Yeah, so I first got involved in the charity Cricket Without Boundaries in 2012. So just when I graduated from university. And at that stage, I was struggling a little bit with cricket in general, just in terms of the enjoyment factor, everything else, a lot of other things, and kind of decided I needed a bit of perspective and actually to give back to a sport that had given me so much, the opportunity to travel the world at a young age, to do all these amazing things, and actually just needed to get grounded. So yeah, from 2012 to 2014. So I went on 3 different trips to Kenya, Uganda and Rwanda with Cricket Without Boundaries. And their mission really is to use cricket as a vehicle to spread positive messages and education in health and social issues. The majority of the work has been in Africa, which is where I went to, but they are also expanding into the likes of Jordan as well, into sort of Middle Eastern areas. So they're doing brilliant work. And when I moved out to Dubai, I became less involved in the charity. But since I've come back, I've now become a trustee of the charity. And they do some amazing work, and particularly with some of the ambassadors that I've met that are permanently funded by the charity in country and who lead the projects that go out there. So, and they're constantly working on the ground. So it was a real eye-opening, amazing, incredible experience, and something that really added value to kind of my cricket at the time.
And what are some of the differences when you go on trips like these between being a player and then going for charity work?
I think the biggest thing is that you just let loose is the wrong term, but like you're there for pure enjoyment, and you can see it on the kids, the coaches' faces. If you literally bring out the most simple thing as a tennis ball and it will brighten a kid's day, and you coach and you entertain and you just have pure enjoyment, like you're a big kid yourself. And coming from an elite professional environment where your performance is being analysed, you're constantly trying to improve it, you're constantly trying to be the best you can be, whereas over there it's like completely the opposite. You are there purely for enjoyment, purely for the enjoyment of others, to help with the education of coaches so that they can understand things, and you really feel valued and respected by all of the amazing teachers that are just willing to learn and soak up any knowledge that you have. So I think it's like the kind of that release and relaxation that you need coming from that kind of high pressured environment.
And that enjoyment is really what should be at the root of any kind of sport, shouldn't it? When someone gets into it, when a kid gets into cricket, like a girl, a boy, anyone, it should be about that enjoyment. And do you find that you get the same kind of enjoyment and fulfillment from, performing at that top level as you would doing the charity stuff? Or is it just, it's kind of incomparable because they're quite different?
Great question. Yeah, I think it's quite incomparable because it's a very different type. I mean, I think they are pretty incomparable because I think my best ever memory of kind of enjoyment is when we're at 2009, we were in Sydney. It's the World Cup final, and I was lucky enough to, unlucky enough in one way that I was batting, because I shouldn't have been batting at all at like number 9 or something, but managed to hit the winning runs. And I think the moment where I had pretty much 15 girls running at me or less, Lottie in floods of tears, everyone just coming, like that moment of seeing the rest of your teammates come running towards you is something that I will cherish for a long time. Out of that entire year moment, everything else. Whereas I guess the enjoyment factor is being in a dance mosh pit with tennis balls flying everywhere, with kids just having the best time of their lives, and you've probably made their year by getting them to throw a ball or hit a ball and learn how to play cricket. I think it's two very different feelings, but just as amazing.
And you mentioned 2009, which ended up being a pretty successful year for the England women's team, doing the double as well as the Ashes. What did you feel in that moment when you hit the winning runs in Australia's backyard to take the trophy home?
Well, it's a funny thing. I think I felt physically sick most of the innings when I was on the side, but as soon as I was actually in bat with Nikki Shaw, you're there and you've got a job to do. So and you can actually control what happens, whereas you can't. There's nothing you can do on the side but watch and feel horrendously nervous. And I just remember being like, right, this is what we've got to do, everything else. And I just remember getting a thanks Susie Bates for bowling me a nice leg side low full toss for me to whip to the leg side. It was quite probably the only shot I've got in the book. So yeah, there was like this moment of like relief, like, oh my God, we've actually done it. Make sure that the ball goes to the boundary, you don't get run out or something, like all the rest of it. But yeah, it was amazing. And I'd spent that whole winter out in Sydney, so it kind of become my second home. So it was really nice to do it there. And yeah, in Australia's backyard's always better, isn't it?
And so talking of backyards, the Commonwealth Games is in the backyard for all of us next year. And sadly, not something you would have been able to compete in, because this is going to be the first cricket in the Commonwealth Games, and the women's cricket is what we're having, which honestly, I just cannot be more excited. When did this become apparent this is going to be a thing, and how mega super duper excited were you?
So, this all came to a head probably, well, there've been a lot of discussions above my station when I was at ICC, kind of in the sort of 2017-16 years, but the real kind of grunt work came in 2018. And I remember it was November, December. It was the Women's T20 World Cup in the West Indies during that time. And we were basically pulling a bid together to get women's cricket in the Commonwealth Games. And we were working off the time zones between the West Indies, Dubai and the UK to try and get this bid in on time, because we only had a couple of weeks to get it in across multiple time zones. So it was, and during an event. So it was an interesting time. And then we had to, on my way back from the West Indies in, again, I think it was end of November, December, had to actually go and present the bid to a panel. And then there was a series of levels of negotiation. And then obviously it got announced that cricket would be included in the sports programme, which was really very exciting. And then I started this role, which is the sport competition manager for cricket, in March of this year. So I figured it was the opportunity to start something pretty much completely from scratch, something that the organising committee have never really done. There was a men's competition in Kuala Lumpur in 1998, but it was 50 overs. I think the first matches started before the opening ceremony, and it was a lot different back then. So pretty much starting from scratch, and obviously the women are taking front and centre at this games, which is amazing as well.
We've seen the impact visibility and TV rights and all this fun stuff can have on the women's game with the 100 this year. What do you think it will mean for the women's game to have women's cricket in the Commonwealth?
I think it's amazing. One, because there's real good synergy between the Commonwealth countries that play cricket and just the countries that play cricket. They're pretty much identical. So you're going to have all of the best teams there. So England, Australia, India, Pakistan, South Africa, New Zealand, and then a couple more qualifiers. So it'll be all the best international teams there. I think also secondly, it's going to be an amazing venue at Edgbaston. You know, they are well versed in hosting international competitions, World Cups. Obviously, they have T20 Blast Finals Day pretty much every year. They're good at creating great atmospheres. And I think lastly, it's around the fact that it's a multi-sport event. So it's going to open up a huge audience to people that have never experienced cricket before, and they're going to be seeing the women do it. So I guess I'm thinking of myself as a fan of sport. When the Olympics were on, I was watching the BMX, the taekwondo, the triathlon team event, like something that I would never ever watch normally, but because it's an Olympics, I would absolutely have it on. So I'm imagining there's going to be a lot of people out there that are either coming as part of the ticket ballot and are like, do you know what, got to try cricket for the first time, or they see it on the TV. And obviously being on BBC as well will be a massive boost. And you've seen the kind of impact that the hundreds had being on free-to-air TV. So it's hugely exciting. It's a jam-packed schedule, and with the best teams there. So I'm just looking forward to next year.
Are there ever any moments you're like, oh, I wish, I was still in my prime at the moment and I would get the opportunity to play in something like Commonwealth Games on home soil?
I mean, I'm not going to lie, the opportunity to add a medal to a collection rather than a trophy or an urn would be amazing. I'm not gonna lie on that one. But I think Sophie Eccleston has the left arm spin department very, very much covered. So I probably wouldn't even get in the team.
She is quite good. We can't really deny that one.
No, I can't at all.
Yeah, and also, so it's not just teams like England and Australia, the big names of the women's game playing. What do you think it means for those smaller nations that don't necessarily get that kind of coverage to get an opportunity to play in something like the Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think the ICC decided that the final place would be determined by a qualification event in January of next year. So it gives the opportunity of some of those countries that are really pushing for an opportunity on a global stage. So the likes of Scotland, the likes of PNG, now I'm reeling off, but Sri Lanka and Bangladesh are still to qualify. So it'll be a really competitive tournament. I'm looking forward to seeing how that all pans out. And if one of those kind of emerging teams gets in the Commonwealth Games, I think it'd be brilliant for them and a brilliant story as well.
And you mentioned about free-to-air with the 100, and then on the back of that, we saw a couple of the England games, most notably the T20 series on free-to-air. How important is it for young girls and young women who perhaps might not know what cricket is, and then they're just flicking to the channels and they can just see cricket there and fall in love with the game?
Yeah, it's vital. I think there's always that drop off and challenge when sport comes or is put behind a paywall. I think giving it that coverage, getting it into every household that's got a TV license is amazing. And not only just in the UK, I think also there'll be rights holders from around the world showing this cricket. So it'll be great to see young girls seeing some of the best athletes on a world stage and a great event. And I think can't get much better than that.
And also it's such a prolific stadium as Edgbaston, Fortress Edgbaston. It's seen a lot of cricket and a lot of historic moments over the time. So let's hope there's something else to come in there. And obviously your role involves a lot of organisation and imagining many spreadsheets and that kind of thing. So you said you were very regimented at school and dedicated, a bit of a geek. Is that something that's helping you now?
Yes, I would say so. You are correct. There's quite a lot of spreadsheets, but there's just, I think the biggest learning curve I had from here is being in a multi-sports environment. Like you don't quite understand how big a machine it is until you're in it. And I think my role here is basically to be the cricket expert and go, this is what athletes need for transport, this is what they need to eat, and this is what the timings are for matches. And it actually has a massive impact, because take the transport, for example, it's not just cricket. They're dealing with 19 sports, 3 villages. It's It's a big beast. So that's what's been a lot of fun to understand and be a part of. And I think it's great that cricketers will get to experience what it's like to see other sports, to be around other athletes, to be part of this kind of multi-sports friendly games, as we say.
And obviously you stepped away from England before sort of professional contracts came into place, and now with the regional side, each team gets 5 contractors at Western Storm, which fund their 6th contract. How important for the development of the game do you think that is?
I think it's been a really brilliant step made by the ECB. I think it's hard because lots of people say, well, how can you have 5 or 6 domestic professionals when actually you need a team or squad of 15? You can always want more, but I think it is really important to have that pool of professional players to support the international side. I mean, I'm sure you've spoken about it before, but the likes of Tash Farrant, who may not have even stayed in the game if she hadn't had a domestic contract offered to her. And I think it's really important to keep your best players in a professional setup and supporting those teams domestically. And I do think that domestic cricket in the UK, now that you can even see it on TV, has improved massively over the last few years. And I think professionalisation of the domestic game can only help that. I think, Australia's leading the charge. They're quite frankly, far ahead of the pack in that respect. And I think it shows because the depth of the players, every time I see a new Australia player make a debut, it doesn't look like a debutant to me. They have huge depth in their player pool. And I think that, professionalising the domestic system is the only way you can do that.
And with England at the minute, with the contracts, it's never been wider, so to speak, to get in the England squad. And being a Sussex girl yourself, you must feel some pride seeing the likes of Maya Bouchier and Charlie Dean enter that England fold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great to see new young faces making their debuts and getting a chance. I think the England team, compared to a lot, has been quite formulaic in the fact that the same faces are always selected, and there hasn't been as much competition for places as you may see in other teams. And I think it's really good now that new players are coming in, new players are stepping up, and seeing how they're actually being rewarded for those chances on the stage. I mean, Charlie Dean did a great job when she got her chance. So I think it's good. And I think also the domestic competition now in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint, the Charlotte Edwards Trophy, being kind of that high performance, smaller number of teams allows some of those younger players to really shine and take stage and get noticed. So I think that's working as well.
It's all about that see it to be it, and that's what the free-to-air, the contracts and all of this are doing. And it's a development we've seen really ramp up over the last year, which is amazing. But you must have seen it change quite a lot since you first got involved. That was just me going on about see it to be it has all ramped up massively, like really accelerated in the last year. But you've seen it change a lot since you first got involved, haven't you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, go back, 15, 16 years, I was making my international debut and I didn't even know the opposition. So that's like 15 years ago. Then I guess you fast forward to 2016. And I remember being in a meeting with my boss and I was trying to get the women's global qualifier to be live streamed because it wasn't in anyone's budgets and we were trying to fight for it. We managed to get, I think it was the games from one venue live streamed plus some digital content clips on that. And off the back of that, we then had a conversation or in the ICC boardrooms, again, above me slightly around, well, we need to televise the Women's World Cup. Like, why is it that only 10 games are going to be televised? And all of a sudden made this decision because there was a tie and that was televised in the qualifier between India and South Africa that got brilliant views to say we need to televise all the women's games at the Women's World Cup in 2017. So honestly, I think the decision was made in April 2017 and obviously the event was in June, July when they were like, we need to televise all the games. And they were like, okay, how we're going to do this. So, trying to get commentators, trying to get all of the camera operators, any sort of additional scaffolding needed, all had to go in at the last minute. And it was one of the best decisions they made because, like you said, you need to see the games, you need to create the content, you need to really bring to life those magic moments, and you can only do that if a camera's watching it. So that was a massive shift within the ICC, and obviously it went so well that they've now committed to televising every single Women's World Cup match. So that was quite the turning point, I think. So it's been changed quite a lot, and now obviously they're leaps and bounds, and you've got a 84,000 seater stadium filled so at the T20 World Cup, which was quite a sight to behold.
Yeah, and so obviously we won't keep you for too much of the day because I imagine there's probably quite a lot going on at your end that you don't want to sit chatting to us in our hoodies all day. But so it's 290 odd days to the Commonwealth Games starting, something like that. What is the plan now? What's the next thing on the agenda?
Oh, great question. I think the first things first is I'm lucky is that I have a venue that is well versed in hosting international cricket. So I'm not working with either a building site or a completely greenfield site from scratch. So that's great. I think the thing is around, firstly, once we know all the teams, getting them in, sorting out their village, and just to engage with the ECB and obviously Warwickshire and counties within the West Midlands. Going to get this again with a home multi-sports games in the UK, and trying to build on the momentum that they've seen from the 100 last year, hopefully with a good performance in the World Cup, or there will be a World Cup winning side anyway at the games. So we will see. But yeah, those are kind of the key things around building relationship, building momentum, and making sure it's the best show possible and entertaining for fans.
And in that, all that time off you have, do you still turn your arm over ever?
So the last ball I bowled, and I don't know if this counts, was for David Richardson's leaving do in 2019, and it was with a tennis ball in an indoor school off about 10 yards. But an actual full 22-yard ball, bowled, probably was my last game for Sussex in 2015. September 2015 was the last time I ever bowled. But no, I basically try and play every other sport at the moment. So playing hockey currently in Birmingham, did a bit of touch rugby when I was in Dubai, also played for the ICC football team when I was there, but haven't. Unfortunately, the football night and the hockey night clashes here, so can't do that. Bit of golf, obviously, most retired cricketers play golf. So yeah, and I'm into CrossFit, which I can't believe I've said that out loud. But yes, I'm one of those as well. So lots of other things keeping me busy.
Yeah, and so just on the link between your work with the Commonwealth and charity stuff, you're still doing your stuff with Cricket Without Boundaries alongside, and do you find that the two somehow help each other out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, at the moment we're doing a massive volunteer recruitment drive. Well, I say recruitment drive, but we're currently going through the process of the recruitment of volunteers. So interviews and everything for lots of different roles across the games, and I'll have a pool of cricket specific volunteers. So kind of my experience and knowledge from helping out with volunteer recruitment, the Cricket Without Boundaries is helping somewhat. There is a legacy kind of project and team within Birmingham 22 Commonwealth Games, but that's mainly based for activities within the West Midlands and regenerating the area and the young population here. So I wish there was more that could be done between the two, but unfortunately for my Cricket Without Boundaries trustee hat, there's not more that can be done really.
Honestly, what you're doing is so fab, and it's been great to see you play and develop from when you were just bowling in the nets to look at you now. And we are so excited by having women's cricket.
Now, as you can probably tell, this was recorded a while ago. I believe we recorded this back in October. So obviously a lot of things have changed, but have no fear, because would we ever leave you guys in the dark? Georgie sat down recently to catch up with Holly Colvin to get the latest goss on the Commonwealths.
So welcome to part 2 of Holly Colvin, cricket extraordinaire, cricket organiser extraordinaire, as we get to the business end. It's very, very close to the Commonwealth Games now. Holly, how are you feeling?
Excited is probably the short word. I just cannot wait for a ball to actually finally be bowled at Edgbaston on the 29th of July. It can't come soon enough. At the same time, obviously, there's still a few bits and bobs to get finalised before everyone arrives in town. But yeah, just ready and raring to go now.
And what are things looking like around Birmingham? Is it all Commonwealth Games now? Does Edgbaston look amazing?
Yeah, so Birmingham, you'll see it around the city. There's all the sort of city dressing up. You should know that the Commonwealth Games is in town. Literally, as you walk out of New Street Station, all you can see is the branding. The mega store, so the big merchandise store, the main one in Victoria Square, has opened. Now there was official opening earlier this week. And Edgbaston is currently quite busy at the moment with the England-India men's test match, and there's a few more fixtures there to go. So that will start to transform as of sort of the 23rd of July in the build up to the games. So plenty still happening around the city.
And so since we last spoke, which would have been October time, I guess, what have you been up to? Because it must have been a manic few months.
It certainly has. So now we've very much stopped the sort of planning phase, and it's now sort of, they call sort of readiness is probably the technical term. But it's now basically ensuring that what we've put in place and all the plans we have actually works. So testing things out, doing some simulations, working very, very closely with the venue, understanding kind of, because obviously their venue has continuously been changing over this season as well. So making sure that everything that we have planned, there's no gaps, and we can be agile on the ground to deal with things. So lots of different things going on, and obviously been busy watching everything unfold in the city, like I said, with all the city dressing going up. So that's exciting.
And since we spoke, we've had the qualifications come in, and we've also got the schedule. What excites you most about seeing maybe some teams we wouldn't necessarily see so much of?
Yeah, so I think it's got a fantastic mix of those that, you know, the best teams in the world that you'd see on a global stage, plus obviously Barbados representing the West Indies. So it'll be the first time that they've played an official sort of T20 international against the full member nations as such. So that will be great. And I think also it'll just be really competitive, because even though Barbados are representing themselves as a nation, they've still got world-class players. So you'll still see the likes of Hayley Matthews leading the side, Gianda Dottin, sort of the Knight twins in there. So they've got a lot of experience who've played international cricket as well. And then obviously the usual suspects in India, Australia, England, Pakistan, New Zealand, Sri Lanka. So that there'll be a great mix. And I can't wait for the competition to unfold, really.
And what have ticket sales and everything looked like? Because I know there's a lot of young girls out there who are going to be so excited to see women's cricket as the only cricket in this tournament.
So ticket sales are going well, in terms of we have a lot of tickets to sell. So we're obviously ticketing not just one match day, we're ticketing each match individually. So we've got 16 matches to sell. There are still tickets available for all matches, including actually the medal matches as well, but they're obviously going thick and fast. So absolutely, people can still go onto the Birmingham 22 website and grab tickets and see kind of the world-class game in action.
And what does it mean for the women's game and the game as a whole to have this in the tournament, and to you as holding it for the first time?
Yeah, it's a huge moment, I think for a manner of reasons. One is kind of getting new people through the door and actually experiencing cricket for the first time, and it might be their experience of cricket for the first time is women's cricket, so making that great first impression, I think, and bringing people together within the city of Birmingham, within the West Midlands as well, to get them enthused. And I think the other quite simple thing, particularly for cricket in the UK, is it's being slap bang in the centre of free-to-air TV, right on BBC. All the England games will be on BBC One, and the rest of the games, I don't know the exact details, but will definitely be available across sort of their digital channels and on the red buttons. So I think that getting visibility across, in homes across the UK is massive, and obviously having partners with some of the other nations that are participating in the games as well. So to see it on their free-to-air channels is huge. So I think it's just that opportunity for cricket for the first time, really, to be part of something bigger, to be part of that multi-sports games kind of machine, and get more people that are just general sports fans actually becoming fans of cricket.
And would you have wanted to play in this?
No, it's quite a straightforward answer. No, I get so lots of people have said this every time I've been to sort of World Cup events, like, don't you wish you're out there? My simple answer is no. I get far more pleasure in putting it on and watching people perform, and knowing that it's something that I've been able to, enabled players to play in world-class stadiums. I find other joys now in other ways, but I absolutely love what I do. And I think one of the main reasons I took this job with the Birmingham 22 Games is because it's a first, and we can build a blueprint for cricket in multi-sports games in the future, and actually is quite an important part of legacy of the game as well. So that's what drew me to it, and that's why I love what I do.
And that takes us nicely to my next question about cricket in a multi-sport event. Talk to me about the Olympics. Are we aiming for that one? And what would your hope be on that, to be some part of it?
Yeah, I think definitely it can only be good for the sport to be part of the Olympics. That Olympic movement just opens up so many more avenues to play cricket across the world and actually diversify where cricket is strong around the world, and enhance funding opportunities for teams, both men's and women's teams, is part of an Olympic movement. So absolutely would love to see cricket in the Games. Obviously, this is the first time really, obviously it's been in the Asian Games, but in a Commonwealth Games to have cricket part of that, it's certainly going to be kind of a showcase for how it finds its place within a multi-sports games. And I'm sure the Olympics will be looking on to see how well it goes. Whether cricket's in the Olympics in the future, that's obviously probably out of my hands, but I'm going to do the best I can to show why it should be. But yeah, hopefully that's something that's in cricket's future.
And obviously multi-sport event, so many different sports going on. You say you don't want to play cricket, you wouldn't want to be part of this. If there were a sport in the Commonwealth Games that you could be part of, what would you pick?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, I would love to be able to do gymnastics, but I know how much hard work and dedication that takes, which I'm not sure I'd really. And also my flexibility is so bad that it would be the worst discipline I could pick. But I'd love to be able to do
leotard. I couldn't rock a sparkly leotard either, I don't think.
No, that's also true. But yeah, so that's probably something. I mean, do you know what? Probably now I would probably go for lawn bowls. I think it'd be very therapeutic, very social sport. I imagine it's played in some fair weather countries. Yeah, a lot of skill involved, and actually, be quite a good community sport as well. There's quite a lot of sports clubs around, especially in this UK, that also have some lawn bowls. So maybe that.
Yeah, and so we're only a few weeks away now from it all kicking off. What happens between now and then?
Oh, great question. I mean, for me, it's kind of making sure I'm having conversations with all of the participating countries so that they're aware of all the things that they should expect when they arrive, and also the things that they need to do as well that we need to organise. So there's obviously a lot of things pre-competition that need to go on in terms of meetings and media and all the rest of it that we need to make sure is all in place. We're obviously finalising everything in terms of all the arrivals. So the arrivals and departures team, which obviously finding out when the teams are going to get in. And then I think the key thing is also the squad selections. So 11th of July is the deadline for teams actually to submit their final squads of 15. So once we know all of that, then we can start again, finalise all of our plans and everything in terms of the players themselves and also their support staff. So plenty of stuff to be going on between now and then obviously hit the ground running. 22nd of July is when the first teams arrive.
And I guess for cricket teams, it is quite a strange thing because they're not used to being part of someone like the England team aren't going to be used to being part of such a massive Team England as a whole. So I guess that's exciting for them, but also brings that factor that it's quite difficult. It's something completely new. They're not used to it. It's going to be very different for them. And then there's lots of public transport going on, isn't there, as well? So not getting their private buses, someone carrying all their stuff for them. So it's going to be very different for a lot of these teams, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's called the Friendly Games for a reason, and I keep hammering that home. So there will be some slight nuances that they're not used to being part of, I guess, a big machine. Buses are not dedicated to them; they're running on schedules, so they'll have to kind of fall in line with, I guess, some of the organisational planning and have less of a say, I guess, on determining some of their own schedules. So we obviously have to work with each other to find a middle ground around what works for everyone and what works for us, which is part of my role. But I think actually everyone's been brilliant. Everyone I've spoken to, all the cricket teams I've spoken to understand that. They get it. They know it's not a cricket only competition. They realise it's part of multi-sport. So I think there will be very sort of different experiences, and some will be to their benefit and be fantastic. And some might be just a bit different that they'll have to adapt some of their planning to. So I think yeah, there's a lot of, we're a multi-sport, we're a public transport games. So again, a lot of fans getting to and from venues. We are promoting public transport. We're trying to be as sustainable as possible. And there's some great kind of networks and connections within the West Midlands that you can use for free to get to all of the matches.
And what's been the hardest thing leading up to the games to sort out?
What's been the hardest thing? The weather. That would be probably, that's the one thing. I know it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but it's genuinely the one thing that is keeping me up at night is I cannot control the weather. And you can obviously, it's a very condensed schedule. And so, I mean, the last couple of days here has just proven how different the weather can be in a matter of 24 hours, just with the India Test match at Edgbaston at the moment. So it's nothing I control. We've obviously got all the regulations in place in order to deal with weather. It's just trying to make the most of the competition that we have. So that I'd say is the one thing that I'm worried about.
And you never know, we might get a heat wave.
Yes, I would be all up for a heat wave. I would be up for people. If people are moaning how hot it is, it would be a joy.
Yeah, wouldn't it just? Get your legs out, get a tan on. That's what I'm aiming for at the Commonwealth Games. So, yeah, we're very nearly there. You say that first ball is when you're going to feel the relief. When are you going to feel the excitement? What's the thing that you're most excited about? And will it be a glass of champagne when it's all over?
What am I actually, do you know what I'm really excited about is actually witnessing a medal ceremony? Because obviously I've come from a sport where you just see a trophy lift and obviously some sparklers and stuff, but actually having that moment of the 3 teams on a podium in Edgbaston, seeing all the branding up and seeing teams being awarded their medals and hearing the national anthem of whichever team it is, I think that's the moment I'm really excited for, to see, and also see what it means to the teams as well, because it'll be the first time that they get awarded medals. So yeah, I'd say that is probably the moment that I'm looking forward to.
I'm sure that'll be a different answer if it's the Australian national anthem that we hear. It's actually our least favourite part and we're going to forget all about it, basically. Well, I think that's all of our catching up we had to do from last time we spoke, because obviously we talked a lot about you and getting into your role with Commonwealth Games, but hopefully we'll be able to get a catch up in maybe while we're there. I'll try and see you while we're at the games. I'm sure both of us are going to be running around like headless chickens, get a good pair of trainers in, I've been told. And then maybe we'll have to have a debrief afterwards, potentially with a glass of wine or a bottle each.
Yeah, my round.
Yeah, you buy the first one, I get the second, and we'll just carry on. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much for taking time out on one of your last Sundays of rest before it all kicks off. And yeah, quite excited. So I will see you in a few weeks, hopefully.
All right, thanks, Georgie. Cheers.
Thanks so much. Have a nice evening.
Massive thank you to Holly for coming on and being a guest, and for also giving us an update on what's going on with the Commonwealths. Really interesting stories to hear, and really interesting to hear her perspective on being so young, making her debut for England, as well as winning the World Cup twice in 1 year. Of course, they were different formats, but still. Unprecedented times, and I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again. And to all our listeners, if you want to keep up to date with everything that we're doing, you can follow us on Twitter at WCricketChat, on Instagram at Women's Cricket Chat, and if you want to give us a like on Facebook, we are Women's Cricket Chat. If you'd like to give our personal Twitters a follow, then it's at HannahT1194, at GeorgieHeath27, at CassieCoombs98, at Mehika Varshni, and I'm at Alex Jane Pereira. This has been Women's Cricket Chat. Tune in next time.